So many screens. Okay, cool. So Anne-Marie and I are with the city, and here we're talking about some of the projects that we've worked on with regard to different housing related initiatives at the city. So I'll just introduce Anne-Marie, innovation lead and product manager with the service design and delivery team. We were formerly CXI. I have a slide about that. The name has changed and the divisions have changed many times. And I'm a service design consultant with the team. Previously worked at Code for Canada, so I know Luke and Gabe very well, worked with them for a year, so really excited to be here having them online. Yeah, so we're just going to talk about a little bit about our team and our approach. Like the title says, human-centered, and so that's kind of like the foundation for all of our work. Oh yeah, is that a speaker? Cool. And then we'll just talk about some of the initiatives that we've been working on for the last few years, some lessons learned, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So yeah, I think we'll have to run through some slides quickly so we can stay on time.
Okay, so a little bit of our team's journey. So we started in 2017 with the Bloomberg Philanthropy Grant. And you may have known about this, but Bloomberg has about 4 cohorts of cities right now that have gone through their grant process. Essentially, Mike wanted to give cities grants to run cities like he ran New York in a very human-centered design approach. So our role was, how do we bring human-centered design into the city? And you can see through this journey, it's not always easy. It changes, it evolves. We've had some grant extensions due to COVID. It was just our spend cost was not able to kind of go through what we expected it to go through. So we were able to expand the grant to what normally is 3 years to 5 years. But with that, we are, even to this day, still very connected with the Bloomberg network and the Bloomberg cities, or the city I teams around the world. Which is great for us because a lot of cities, they're very different geographically, but we face a lot of similar civic issues, right? Housing, transportation. Right now, public transit safety is a big issue that we discuss. And we're able to connect in different networks, able to connect with different people. Martha and I sit on a creative coalition board with Berlin, New York, London, and us so far. And again, it's a way that we can connect. Like, cities are our peers, and we learn from each other. We learn from what we try to do. We learn with sometimes our struggles and what works and what doesn't work. So as many, and I say that story as a background, and not just us, but many I teams across our network face a lot of sort of, where do we really belong at City Hall? So what we started is under the city manager's office, and we had a couple of different sort of unique groups: transformation office, innovation office, and we had resiliency office, and that was funded through the Rockefeller Group. From then, our team kind of started to evolve and expand a little bit, and we were like, well, where do we begin? Kind of, where does our journey fit, and how can we better align with our teams? So we kind of dipped a little bit into maybe, do we belong in technology? We quickly jumped out of that pool, and we are now within a division called Customer Experience. And with that, our own little team is called the Service Design and Delivery. And then our team, part of that, is still under the innovation team, because we work not just digitally, but as many of you know, oftentimes bridge the gap between digital and analog, and understanding sort of the different prototypes that align to that. And all the work that Marissa and I do are public facing, and we make an impact, or we try to make an impact on people's lives day to day. And some of our other teams work on things that are a bit more business and operational. Well, so this approach is probably very familiar with many of you, but it is a slide that I proudly stole from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I often use at the city, that we can kind of get people to understand our approach of what does it mean to kind of understand, generate, deliver, but most importantly, how do we get people to understand that we're learning, and we're continuously learning, and it is a path of learning. It's a path of challenging. It's a path of wanting to kind of have people problem solve for you, or with you, I should say, have people sort of challenge some of your ideas, have people challenge hypotheses, and understanding that it's okay to make a mistake. It's a process of learning, and it's not a process necessarily of knowing or solution driven first. So with this, our approach, and many of you will know this, is very empathetic and openness. We talk to a lot of vulnerable residents at the city, or our team does at the city. And that's one of the, when I hire for a service design researcher and service design consultant, that's one of the main things that I try to look for in a candidate, is somebody who can approach all subjects with, and all stakeholders with empathy and openness. Meeting people where they're at and understanding the importance of that, right? They are subject matter experts. They're people with lived experience. How do we deliver both solutions to people, but how do we get to them to understand their story and be a part of their story? Oops, sorry. That's a massive cue that I'm taking too long. So building trust with residents, we know that this is a common thing within government. So how do we then, even if it's not within the government as a whole, but how do we as a team begin to build trust within our residents? From the first point of engagement, from the first email we send, from the first poster we put up in, oftentimes at, shelters or places, like we want to start building trust with residents from there. Offering resources, everything from, oftentimes we get emailed afterwards about how do we help this, how do we get that. Again, that goes from the building the trust, meeting people where they're at. We end up being some of their first points of contact in oftentimes subjects that we're not experts in, but we connect them to people that we know can. And closing the feedback loop. So making sure that we understand sort of who we're trying, like what are our KPIs, who we're trying to deliver, and then making sure even for stakeholders that we really try to close that loop and keeping them updated on our project, keeping them involved as much as possible.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the initiatives that we've been working on. I should say, like within the service design and delivery team, we have kind of these smaller teams that work with different divisions. And so Anne-Marie and I and one other person, hopefully another one soon, work really closely with the Housing Secretariat. So affordable housing, subsidized housing, and obviously we know we're in a huge housing crisis. We have a new mayor who's kind of made it really like fundamental to her platform about addressing some of these problems. So it's been, since she's come on board and since you've been, like, it's been really exciting to really have that push to be creative and think outside the box. So I'll just kind of go through some initiatives that we've worked on over the last few years. So these include, and this isn't like everything, we'll kind of run through some of these, and you'll see just in parentheses below each initiative, anywhere that we really have play a part in these projects from like the very beginning. Usually it's like end to end. So we're doing research, we're really understanding who the users are, we're engaging with people. We're also doing design, we're helping with implementation, really working closely with the tech services department at the city. And then we're thinking about sustainability. We can't just launch a product and then walk away. So just kind of shows you that we have played a part, or a lot of these are in progress in these different kinds of pools of activities. So we can go through for 2020. We just have a little bit of a timeline. This is a project that falls under the tenant support. So
yes,
too.
Just really quickly, COVID hit 2020. We were with the Housing Secretariat for about, like 2 or 3 weeks, and they really wanted us to pivot towards tenant support tools. So the first thing we thought was, let's get information and resources to people to them in the easiest way. One, at the City of Toronto, a lot of tenant work is done through multiple different divisions. So our first goal was, how do you bring that under one page? How do you bring that under one voice? And I have a stat, not here, but somewhere, where it's renter support was the #1 search term on Toronto.ca, but only, I think it was something like 40 people had actually visited some of the actual support pages. So we really tried to bring that in. Within the first month, we saw over a 500% jump on that page, just by, again, aligning divisions, aligning voices. So with that, we also tried to bridge the gap. We did something digital, but we know we need to get something in people's hands. So we created a toolkit, and it had preset legal letters for folks that wanted to respond to their landlord who were facing an eviction. We gave them step-by-step about what to do for an eviction, what not to do in a part of the eviction, what to expect at part of an eviction. So we connected, the city has a tenant advisory committee. We spoke to every single one of those members. We actually had a story from one of them who actually kind of added that empathetic approach, like, you're not alone, this faces a lot of people. We spoke to almost 40 people in the public, 16 city staff, 8 community organizations, 2 landlord representatives. And we, instead of just doing it, and I'm gonna get into more arguments with the city about this, but they wanted us to do it in top 3 languages of the city, but actually we looked at it from top 3 languages of the neighborhoods facing the highest number of evictions. And they fought me on that, and they will continue to fight me on that in my next version, and Marisa can hear this conversation. But I'm really something that our data is gonna drive what we do and why we do it and the people that we serve. So that's very much, we make sure that at every single point that I have data for people to understand. Oftentimes city staff just look at it at a corporate level. We look at it at a very specific user level. And then this is us literally driving the toolkit in a Mini Cooper. But we had 1,500 toolkits that we distributed almost by hand. We took 500 to community agencies, 250 to counselors' offices. In fact, counselors have requested more of them to bring them to their committee meetings. We sent 500 to MP and MPP offices, additional 300 copies requested over that time. You can see we translated in 4 different languages. And oftentimes in city council, people, and especially in the infrastructure and housing committee, this gets complimented often, like on a regular basis, about how people are actually using this. And community agency, housing support workers, they're using it to something to give to people as well. And I think our goal for this was to make sure that people were both educated about the topic and they were able to advocate for themselves. The city has no jurisdiction under tenant evictions, as a fun fact, but what we can do, and what we know we can do, is provide people with resources, information, opportunity to be empowered, and opportunity to educate themselves in a really simplified way. And the RTA, if you've ever seen it, is not a simplified document. So some of the feedback that we've heard, this is the first resource created to support our tenants rather than our landlord, and that was Councillor Perks. And he really complimented it, which was very surprising. The toolkit is very informative and easy to understand. I would suggest having the handbook available in even more languages if possible. Eviction toolkit and its distribution is an invaluable instrument to keep tenants from foregoing their rights and their homes. And this is from Don Valley Community Legal Center. So next year. So we're working, as the City of Toronto is looking at expanding. Right now we have an access system for rent geared to income. But the team has been sort of targeted at ways that we can look at how can we make housing access more for specifically affordable housing units. So affordable housing is housing that is 100% to 80% under market value. Okay, and it is something that is not subsidized by the city in terms of rent, so you have to be able to afford that rent, but it is at market value and or under, usually hovering around the 80% mark. So we really needed to centralize the system, bring all housing providers together. So we took, and the city has done like housing agencies have done different ways to do it. It was very decentralized in the past, and we were trying to bring in a system that makes sense. So we had to contact people who participated in sort of what would be a housing lottery or housing sort of selection process, depending on the housing provider. So we invited over 1,600 people to participate in our interviews. We had 307 people give us feedback, and we had 112 people interviewed in this process. Even then, at that point, did we get some feedback from city councilors saying, well, I didn't hear about it, I didn't engage with my community. My response, and they completely understood this, was we actually looked at people who had the 2 recent experiences. People who recently applied to affordable housing lottery, we wanted to know about their experience in those lotteries. And that for us, And from then they understood sort of why it was like, we wanted to hear their pain points, we wanted to hear the struggles, we wanted to hear what they thought was fair or not fair. And as you can see, we also did 2 surveys, over 25 interviews, 23 unfacilitated testings, 2 tenant advisory committee, 18 workshops, as well as with housing providers, housing agencies, and staff. So we built a prototype. And we understood that a lot of people had issues. They wanted a one window approach. So somebody that applied for RGI and somebody that applied for affordable housing to have it under one view. They also uploading documents. Right now, you have to scan a document, and you don't have to, there's no photo uploading or income verification or character recognition. So that's something that we had proposed. And then ease of use, a really positive response from TAC and Housing Committee on our final prototype. So this is gonna be my last slide. Features of the design concept. One window approach. We wanted something that was transparency and trust. Communication and setting people up for success before the application. Better resident-facing content and information. And we wanted to leverage a system to increase efficiency for staff and the public, and create a more accessible and equitable system, both in allocation for housing, but also a system people can easily understand and make an informed choice about their housing selection. Who's gonna do that? Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over to Marisa.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about some really more recent housing initiatives. And so one is the Housing Data Hub. And this is a public-facing product that launched in March of this year. I'm not sure, like, if you want to talk about the impetus where this is kind of predates me, a little bit of why we wanted to do that. If you just want to say like 2 things about that.
Yeah, so the city wanted to kind of create and centralize some of their data. And as you can imagine, as I mentioned, even on the tenant stuff, everything is very siloed at the city. Data is very siloed at the city. Everybody tries to keep it to themselves. They think that the public display of data is something that, you know, maybe they don't feel like their program's being successful or whatever. But instead, it's more so about bringing that transparency out. And we were really kind of, the city before that was really struggling. We had this mandate, we had this goal, we had this like vision. But again, we were kind of struggling up until December 2023 to really activate the different divisions at the city to actually share their data with us. If we have no mandate, even coming down from senior leadership to say they have to share it, they're gonna kind of drag their feet until they actually have to do it.
Yeah, so none of the data on this data hub has been shared publicly in this way. So wrangling, herding the cats was quite an endeavor for our team and for the tech services team to bring this all together. So just talk about some of the hurdles. So we had actually, it was former Mayor Tory in December of last year came with a directive saying that we need to have this public-facing data sort of dashboard or way to display data that's updated quarterly, and the ability to download it and understand it in different ways, and you have to get it done in 3 months. And so that was, if you're familiar with how the pace of government, that is like beyond light speed. But that really kicked it into high gear, and any sort of blockers we faced, maybe from other divisions, is like, oh, mayor's directive, got to do this. So that was really helpful, actually. Yeah. But still, some of the hurdles, like figuring out where all the data comes from, figuring out the data validity, and then there's just so many divisions involved that touch housing data in different ways. And of course, as Anne-Marie said, they're siloed, they don't talk to each other. Sometimes there's like territorial issues. So, we're trying to kind of like wrangle it all together. So yeah, essentially working on a really, really tight timeline, and also, keeping in mind accessibility, AODA compliance is top of mind. So these were some of the big hurdles we faced. So we went right into research. We talked to a number of city staff who deal with this data in different ways. Across divisions. We talked to subject matter experts. I don't know if Mark Richardson is on the call. I didn't see his name before, but talk to Mark. You got to talk to Mark when you talk about housing, especially data. and researchers out of TMU, housing providers, housing advocates, so many people who are interested in housing data for various reasons. And of course, people with lived experience, and, everyday Torontonians who, we wanted to get their feedback about housing and data and kind of what's important to them. So it's just some pictures from an internal ideation session we did with Housing Secretariat. And then for resident engagement, we always kind of want to get out there into the city. And so we identified, based on areas that have higher eviction rates and the neighborhood improvement areas, we identified 5 locations, and we did pop-ups in all of those locations at various times of the day, just to meet residents, talk about housing, make them feel heard and understood. And we just wanted to really collect their feedback and their stories. Pop-ups in action. And I don't know how we're doing on time, but I'll just do we have this demo. Is the sound gonna work? Oh no, it's not.
Welcome to the Toronto Housing Data Hub, a one-stop shop to explore information and data related to housing in the City of Toronto. Here, you'll be able to track the progress on how the city is advancing progress set out in the Housing TO 2020 to 2030 Action Plan to improve the overall health.
Oops, sorry, just clicked off of that.
Welcome to the definitions as you were exploring the.
I'm gonna mute our former colleague Selena and just kind of go through. We can put the link in after, but you'll just see that the data is broken up into different categories, and there's these series. You can see these tabs over there. There's these series of charts that were created using a program called COT Charts that Tech Services made for us. And there's also a link to an affordable housing map as well. And so everything has links to open data, the raw data. Everything's updated quarterly. And so it's been a challenge to kind of get this all up. But we did it for March. And then we've since run through 2 iterations, and it's getting a lot easier. And the behind the scenes data process seems to be cleaning itself up and getting organized as well. So that's great to see. So just to show the compression of all the things we had to do. And now, we're getting ready. We can't be leading this project forever. And so part of it is just really building capacity within our partners at the Housing Secretariat to take this on and to continue working with our tech team to have these quarterly updates. So we're working towards sustainability for early next year. So some more stuff about our sort of principles around sustainability and growth: collaboration, communication, and of course, commitment from multi-stakeholders, all divisions. I'll just briefly touch on, this is another more recent initiative. I think this is launched in September of this year. This was there's a Housing TO 2020-2030 Action Plan, which is a really long report, and then every year it gets released, an update. And so who actually really reads that report? So the Housing Secretary wanted to find a way to just make things more visual, and again, have that data visualization component and the link to open data and all of that. So, so this is just some screenshots. You can find this as well, and maybe we'll share a link after. Also linked to from the Data Hub as sort of umbrella, and you click onto one of these boxes, and then you can dig into the data a little bit more and see it cumulative, see how the progress is going as we get further into that 10-year span. As well as just the current snapshot.
Sorry, just to go back on that, we had a lot of, as you can see some of the red boxes, we had a lot of pushback from staff being like, I'm really reluctant to share this information. We're not on target. And I was like, that transparency and the fact that you're not on target is not a bad thing. The reasoning behind it is what people need to know and why they need to know it. So that part about getting people uncomfortable about sharing data at a point where they don't feel like they're at progress is something that we really had to work around in terms of a mindset. It's a public facing, it is a transparency, it is our accountability to the public to put that information out there. It is not a reflection oftentimes of what city staff are doing, but it's actually what we can do and the funding that we get and the resources that we have capacity to.
Okay, and then just real quick, this is a sneak peek of a new tool that we're working on that is coming soon, fingers crossed. We actually just showed this publicly for the first time to the tenant advisory committee last night at a meeting, and this is called the Rights digital tool. So resources, information, and guidance for housing and tenant stability. So this is addressing rent evictions. The city doesn't currently have a formal rent eviction policy, and of course this is all this is a jurisdiction of the province, but we know people first come to the city for okay, what is the deal with rent eviction? What support can I get from the city? And so it's really important that to have those resources there for them. So in coming up with this tool, we did a lot of engagement with people with lived experience, people who've experienced a rent eviction, and there's so many different scenarios around that. And then subject matter experts, legal aid, working closely with them. And then, as you can imagine, our city legal department, who they do not like this tool because, they just think it's too out there, but it's really important we think, to get this information out to people. And we're not giving advice, it's information, fine. But still we want to get it in the hands of people.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we're looking at the RTA, we're looking at rent evictions is a really complicated subject matter in itself, but it's something that's facing Torontonians. So, and it's one of the highest reasons for eviction. So we have two things. We're complicated RTA and then complicated situation. And we're trying to make very individual scenarios so that people they can better understand how their scenario is and sort of the resources that are directly to them.
So the way this tool works is, and I just have screenshots, is it's kind of like a question and then branching logic. So it just kind of understand the person's specific situation. And then along the way, as they answer questions, these tips and immediate actions to take pop up on the right. And so if someone's just it's an overwhelming process, people are coming to this tool overwhelmed and stressed. And so there's tips if they kind of, feel like they don't understand, they can right away, we have phone numbers for them to call, the federal Metro FMTA Tenants Association.
Yeah,
there's just so many, and legal aid clinics and all the resources they can need if they just want to get off this page and talk to someone. And then so we have a series of questions, and then really so for people can understand their rights and know they have rights. The amount of people we spoke to who said oh, I got a text from my landlord and they said I had to move out, so I did. And it's no. And so we want to give people right away, if you get a text from your landlord, that is not an official or formal notice. An N13 isn't a formal notice. And so we just tell them right away, you don't have to move out, and here's the steps you can take. So at the end of this tool, if people want to drop off, they can drop off. If they complete the tool or the questions, they get kind of a summary of their situation and all the resources. They can print it, email it to themselves, and that kind of thing. Bring it to legal aid if that's helpful to them too. So yeah, we're in the process, the end process of development of this and testing. So hopefully this comes soon, mid-December. Along with that is just an update this is a toolkit that Anne-Marie talked about earlier. It needs a refresh, it needs the rent eviction content in it. And we're going to be engaging next week with the tenant advisory committee and legal aid, others to, get their feedback and figure out how are we going to improve this thing, and then get it into community centers, housing help centers, and counselors' offices by the end of the year. Okay, we're really almost done. We've learned a lot just looking back at the last few years. I guess, I've only been here for 2 years, but some of the things we learned just along the way, people are very eager, willing to give feedback, engage them, and really build that trust with them. It really goes a long way. So we'll go back to the same people. We're always kind of expanding that group of people we go back to for feedback. And then, a lot of the city policies, like the rent eviction stuff, tied to other levels of government or jurisdicted by other levels of government. But people do feel more connected to the municipal government, which makes sense. They pay bills here, they do a lot of other things. They look to the city to provide information. It's amazing what you can get done when you have a directive from council or the mayor, and you can launch a pretty complex product in 3 months. And so, at first it was scary, but then it was kind of great to just be like, we got to get this done. We get a lot of pushback. Anne-Marie's usually bad cop. And it's great when, whether it's great for me, whether it's comms, legal, teams, just really, but it's all constructive. We're all trying to work together and figure out a way, but we have to really challenge people. People are really uncomfortable with getting new things out there, as we know. Okay, so just quickly, 2024, what's next?
Yeah, so our goal next year is nothing super defined yet, but you may have seen that the mayor has generated a housing plan report. So we are dissecting that, looking at each of the points and looking at ways that we can support Mayor Chow through this housing plan. Sometimes the small things make a really big impact. So we're looking at opportunities for quick wins, and we're looking at opportunities that are long-term and maybe, require a little bit more, a little bit more time and a little bit more research and sustainability, but we're going to take and dissect some of that, or we have been dissecting some of that and figuring out where we can implement now and what we can think about a little bit longer.
Okay. I don't know if anyone has been looking at Zoom. Did anyone have questions?
Thank you guys so much. I feel like we have time for like one question in person and one question online. Are you two able to stay around to do a breakout session like 8 to 9 p.m.?
Yeah, I mean, we can like stick around.
That's almost 8 p.m.
Yeah. It's 8:30, and then I just wanted to be home for bedtime.
True. Yeah. No worries.
Not mine.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
My kids.
Perfect. Okay. So for those of you online, whoever hits the Q in the chat first, you will get the question. Perfect. And then perfect. We have 2 Zachs. I'm gonna go with Zach in person first.
So the good part of the housing plan, new house thing, most talk about speed. And so like, I'm really interested in how that 3 months goes by. The mayor's interacting. How much they get done, how things we thought morning patterns, like just like elaborate on how that may work. Generation.
Yeah, the question was, how do you take like that 3 month kind of, that was like that compressed timeline, moving fast, and then that was directed by the former mayor, and then how do you kind of apply that to like Mayor Chow and like her initiative to get things done? Is that right?
So we started, essentially, we had some research, but I would say in terms of data, we started with nothing January at the beginning. We started with a mandate. And a lot of times city staff and they'll say like, okay, you got to do this, but like, let's make sure somebody's comfortable around this. Let's make sure. But with that mandate, we were like, now you have to share it with this team, right? We have to make it, and you have to make it valid because it's going to be public and we're going to put it on open data. So we need it granular. And like, if you don't have your stuff together, get it together, because you only have 4 weeks and we have to start building it. One of the biggest challenges for us was AODA, and we wanted to make sure this was a very stakeholder centric. We had, as Marisa mentioned, our SMEs, academics, housing advocates, data experts, and then members of the public who just have the right to understand and know. So we wanted to make something that was very easy and very centric, but also people were able to dive into it. It was not easy. I think we were working literally up until the minute of launch. I think I was late for the press release because it was, or to the press conference because it was at that like critical time. But again, that's okay, right? It was able, we got it done, and other teams were able to see that we were able to get that done, right? It was not easy, but then they got comfortable once they saw it and they got a little bit of that recognition and really positive feedback. So now we have a little team here that is like change advocates for us as we work through. Right? And the more that we do, the more that people are comfortable with us doing certain things or like taking the lead on certain things and talking to the public. And then for next year, same thing. We're going to take each of those things, dive in, look at what we can do as a quick win, something that's 3 months. Where do I need a little bit of push? Where can we actually, also provide a little bit of pullback for the divisions. But some things might take a little bit longer, and we're hoping we can tackle a few quick wins over the first 3 months of next year.
Also, that like where that article in Mayor Chow's, it's like I'm just calling it like the generational transformation stuff that's going to council tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow, first thing on the
anyone-
agenda. I don't know if we read.
So the
what's
Housing
at council
Secretariat, I like listening to, I mean, it's relaxing in some way. But it's going to be, council's going to be kind of debating that. So maybe we'll get some ideas of what will come out of that and what we'll be working on.
Cool. And Zach online, if you want to say your question out loud, you're totally welcome.
It's okay. Luke can go first.
No, you got your question in, Zach. Ask your question.
A neat tool that I've come across when helping people out with tenant-landlord disputes is DocAssemble. I was curious if you guys have heard of it, and if you haven't, I wanted to refer you to it. It's this free open source tool for generating documents for people who aren't familiar with their rights, fighting with their landlord. It'll generate legal documents and letters that kind of sound like it's coming from a legal clinic, though it's not. It's a really cool tool. I thought I'd mention it.
What is it? Not run evictions to you.
Oh, it's called DocAssemble. It's actually from Minneapolis, I think. It's a free and open source tool that they've put on the internet.
Okay, we'll check it out. Thank you, Zach.
Luke, do you have a fast question or a long question?
Luke always has long questions.
Yeah, Marissa's right. It's probably a longer question.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna ask you to hold it for the breakout.
Oh, I see it. Okay. I can answer it pretty quick if you want.
Okay.
I would say to offer, so can you tell us more or offer advice for others in big bureaucracies who want to collaboratively challenge their peers? I would say it's not easy, but approach it like you would at an end user. Be really empathetic. City staff bureaucracy is not necessarily always built to be collaborative. They're built in their silos for different funding purposes, different how they get sort of resources. Some have a line item on your tax receipt, some don't, and some go for not-for-profit, others are for profit. Go to the table and approach it like that. I would say one of the things that I try to be a big advocate for is very much our methodology. So even as I was responding now, where I had comms tell me that they're going to lead the design, I was like, absolutely not. End users will lead the design approach. You will not take leadership on that. So you do have to, don't be afraid to push back in that methodology, especially when you have the data to back it up, right? So at every point, it's from preliminary research to why and who we advocate for, how we recruited, what we learned, our quotes, and I am really, really particular for Marissa. From every point of the data, I can go back to that singular point of how I got to one point. I can tell staff about how we got there from that single beginning point of time. And at that point, that story is really, really powerful. So that's something that I share with all of them when we talk to Bloomberg and we share the story. That's something that we were really big on advocating for, is making sure that you follow that data and follow that research, because that will be a huge point in pushing through some big or small ideas where people are uncomfortable.
Yeah.